Hey, coaches, got a fantastic guest tonight. My good buddy George Coltharp has written a new book, Mastering Off-Season Football, and he's got a companion Coach Tube course to go with it. And he's starting up a new YouTube channel. He's been a busy guy. He shares a big part of the course and book, the part on leadership, and he really does a good job with it. So can't wait to show it to you. Thank you, man.
Allegedly, yeah.
All right, let's talk about your course, man.
All right, cool. I wrote a book, called Mastering Off-Season Football, Proven Strategies to Win, and it's available on Amazon. So if you want to scan the QR code right there on the screen, it'll take you straight to Amazon. And so Mastering Off-Season Football was that. And then I said, okay, well, if I'm gonna write a book, I can take that book and create an online coaching course. And so we've developed Mastering Off-Season Football Strategies to Building Winning Programs over on Coach Tube. And so we have the same course. We've taken the book and we've turned it into an online course. And that course, it's up as we speak in pieces, but it will be ready fully by the weekend. By the end of the weekend, you can see there's going to be downloadable. There's downloadable materials. There's a sample speed and strength program, sample periodization chart, 6-week, 16-week off-season period calendar. There's drill checklists for positions, individual athlete growth plan, leadership accountability, tells the coach how to use those kind of things, and some like just short like best practices for teaching offense and defensive concepts. So, basically I go through the book basically chapter by chapter and in the course online and do the online piece and talk about it. And then but some guys just would rather read about it. And so if you just want to read it, and then of course all those downloadable materials are in the book too. You can go back in the back and look at them and see what those things are. But the actual downloadable pieces are in the course. So if you want those, and then what I may do is take those and make them downloadable and put them maybe over in Patreon or something where guys who are members of the Patreon can download them and adjust them for themselves too. But the piece that kind of made me want to talk about it, and I feel very silly having this conversation with you because I don't think anybody does culture better than you do. Um, being around you for years and knowing who you are and knowing how important culture has been to you, and then actually working with you on both sides as the head coach and as an assistant and seeing how you put culture in, especially in the off season, was something that was really, really important. Um, but one of the pieces that we talked about was creating this shift. And I think if you're ever going to go to a place, whether they've been successful or they haven't been successful, but if you're going to make a change and you're gonna turn a program around or build a program from good to great to, God, boy, I just aged myself on that one. When was the last time you heard somebody say good to great? But I've always said
Still an
this, and
important concept.
right, yeah, and well, somebody moved my cheese along the way as well. So I mean, that just yeah. Do they even do that anymore? I used to get a book at the beginning of every year. But
Now it's a PDF file.
right, yeah, But I think one of the biggest things is if you want to be successful, if you want to change, you have to move your program from a coach led team to a player led team. I think that's if you can ever get to that piece. I think if you were to even the ones that are stack loaded with talent, they're still player led because those cats are just like, look, dude, no, you can't. The kids that are super athletes, they don't want to look bad. They can't look bad. It's like swag. Performance is swag to them. So they become very big player led people too. But so we talk about this program, this leadership program. There's some worksheets to help you do it. It's a 4-week cycle that's repeated every month during the off season. Um, but we want to develop a consistency. So there's a repeatable system. There's accountability piece to it where you want a peer-to-peer standard, not just coach enforce rules. So we want guys to start holding each other accountable. And then we also want to just kind of elevate football IQ. And I think that's one of the things where we really get hurt. Kids, even though they're playing video games and things like that, actual football IQ is something that I think we as coaches don't focus enough on. You know, there's parts of worksheets in here that talks about situational awareness, and it gives them a situation. Hey, it's third down, it's something something. You know, there's this amount of time on the clock. You have this many timeouts. If you catch the ball on this yard line, what do you do? You know, it talks about getting out of bounds or staying in bounds, you know, whatever those things are, but just building situational awareness. And here's kind of that 4-week grind. And you can kind of see, I actually used AI to make this presentation because I hadn't built this presentation when we were going to talk. So I was like, well, let me throw this together because we're going to talk about the leadership piece. And so you can see it just threw this together for me. So I'm really excited about it, because what I did is I took the book in there, I put it in there, and I said, hey, build me a presentation real quick for this right here. So it talks about that. So in week 1, we're going to do a lot of self-evaluation, defining personal standards. And I think that's something where a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to is, what are your personal standards? Like, you know, what's acceptable for you versus what's acceptable for me. I think the closer you can get to where everybody's standard is the same, I think the better off you are. But you can't do that until you see, you know, some people are all right with being 10 minutes late. You know, if I'm 10 minutes late, I'm not coming, you know. And so what the standard is, what the standard is. And so that's kind of where we go with that. And then we start looking at nonverbal versus verbal habits, peer accountability, who's skipping reps in the weight room, you know, who's not doing what they're supposed to do in the classroom, who's doing what they're doing. You know, I think it's a lot of times we spend more time in the off season identifying people who aren't doing right than focusing on people who are. And I think we had a kid at Hopton that, I mean, Lord have mercy. I mean, every time we had a situation, we would just say, look at Bobby Dial. You know, we would say, look at Bobby Dial. Bobby Dial, you know, that joker, he wasn't the greatest in the classroom, but if you walked in that classroom, he was paying attention, he was sitting up front, he was raising his hand, he was asking questions. You know, he might not have got an A on every test, but Bobby Dial was he was involved, he was locked in, and he was doing whatever. When it came time to be in the weight room, did anybody work harder than that kid? No. You know, and if you needed an example, you just said, hey, be like that cat. You know, and I think every program has 2 or 3 guys like that, and you just, I think you get a lot of juice when you say, hey, be like that guy. So you want to build those dudes who have those nonverbal habits, and I believe you can do that. I believe you can do that by saying, hey, be like that guy. You get those young guys in there and you say, hey, be like that guy. And I think you're heads and above. You know, a lot of people don't realize, you know, you're all about servant leadership. You know, the seniors do everything in your program. I mean, they're doing the water, they're the last ones to eat, they're doing everything. And it's because they're the ones that are pulling that program away. And then that's just a concept that a lot of people don't understand. Obviously, week 3 is situational IQ. That's when you're looking at film study and, you know, giving them examples of different things. And then week 4, you're going to review and reset and what are, you know, change the goals and things like that. So it's just kind of a process. You know, how does a coach run this thing? You know, you talk to them, you know, daily touch points, you know, keep it short. You know, I think we used to do in Hopton, we'd come in the weight room and we'd say, what's the word of the day? You know, whether it was family, toughness, whatever. And we'd point out a kid and say, hey, what's your definition of that? Or, you know, one coach, hey, what's your definition of that? And we do it every day before practice too. We do it in the weight room. We do it in practice. And I think that kept doing it. You know, midweek checks, Friday challenges, different kinds of things. And, you know, these are all just kind of like throw them in there. You make it yourself, but the idea is you're developing leadership and accountability in practice. You're not just talking about it, you're implementing it, and it's a daily thing. It's intentional. And I think that's the word we as football coaches sometimes don't understand the most, is that word intentional. What are you doing intentionally? There's a lot of things that are byproducts of other things. You know, we talk about toughness. Well, if you lift weights, you're going to be tough. But are you intentionally building toughness? Are you pushing them to that point and then saying, okay, that point's not good enough, let's go to this point? I mean, if you're not doing that in January, February, March, don't get mad when it ain't happening in September, my guy. You know, when dude ain't tough in September, I mean, you were the one letting him, you know, chill in the weight room and you weren't pushing him to get that last rep. You know, when I'm in the weight room, one of the things, you know, if you got 6 and you get stuck on 5, you're going to take some weight off and get that 6th one. We're going to get that last rep every time, because that's how you build that toughness. And you know, as well as I do, it's more mental than anything. Number 2 is something I think is really cool. Yeah, I mean, it's accountability partners. everybody needs to be paired up. Who's your dude? Who's the one that's going to hold you accountable? Who's the one that's going to be that guy? And hey, if you're a left guard, I want it to be the left tackle, or I want it to be the center, or if it's the defensive end, I want it to be the outside linebacker. Hey, look, I know that if I spill this dude, if I take it for the team, you're gonna make the play, and vice versa. So who's an accountability partner, um, you know, practice reinforcement.
I heard a great concept the other day. I think I was going back through one of Randy Jackson's book, and the concept, the difference between a pro and an amateur is the pro wants you to challenge them in practice, and the amateur wants you to brother-in-law it and make it easier for them.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the pro wants, who was it when Jerry Rice and Dion were on the same team? They wanted to go against each other in one-on-ones.
yeah,
So that
yeah.
that concept of competitive excellence,
I,
whether it's
I
in the
would, I
weight
would,
room or on the practice field.
well, simply put, it's the difference between feelings and results.
Hmm.
I'm more worried about my feelings than I am about my results. And oh, let's pat him on the back. Johnny's gonna be all right. And then Peter, who we've pushed to the end, just scored a touchdown. But
Hmm.
Johnny's feelings are okay, you know. And I think that's kind of a line we as coaches have to fight every day now. With just kind of how this generation is growing up. But then, and I think you and I both have been in this part. We're practicing reinforcement, different captains breaking things down, and then that last part I think is really important is empowering quiet players. We've all had kids that just they didn't do a whole lot of talking and they didn't show a whole lot of emotion, and you're just like, man, what the world is wrong with this kid? And then all of a sudden they make a play and you're like, oh, well, that's just his personality. So identifying those personalities and things like that.
Well, I think
And so hopefully,
the one you mentioned, Bobby Dow. I don't
yeah.
think I ever heard him give a speech, but he was the
Yeah.
best servant leader and one of the best players I've ever had.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and wouldn't stand out in a crowd of anybody. But
Mm-mm.
Lord have mercy, that Joker would run that ball hard and catch and make plays and just. I mean, you want to talk about somebody that got 1,000% out of what the Lord gave him? Definitely that kid did. I mean, just you could win with a team full of hymns. But just kind of what you're dealing when you're dealing with that culture piece and working on that weekly. Is you get this idea of a championship culture where the standards are owned by the players, not enforced by police work, not by the coaches. When the kids are cleaning up the locker room and you ain't got nothing to say, when weights are being put up and you ain't doing nothing but talking to some dude, that's cool. Leaders naturally emerge through this system when you start pushing people to do different things, and then the excellence becomes sustained year after year because now you got more guys to look at. The guy that was looking at Bobby Dow 2 years from now, you're looking at him, and then 2 years later, you're looking at that guy, and I think that's kind of a thing. So that's just kind of one of the pieces that we talk about in the book. Um, is that leadership piece. I'm really excited about the course, getting back into it. I'm really hoping to get the the new YouTube channel grown. Back to where the other one was kind of headed to where we're reaching more coaches. Once you get to that certain situation where you got the 1,000 subs and things like that, then you can start doing live streams and things. And so I'm really excited about getting that grown back up, and hopefully we can do that. So some of you guys who remember the Air Raid Nation or want to hear some of the different things we're doing, just come on over to Coltharp Connect and subscribe and drop a like on the video if you want to pick up a copy of the book or the course. You can check it out right here. Here's there's the link to the book on Amazon and all that good stuff. And like I said, man, it's a labor of love, and it's been fun, and just all these new tools. And I mean, it's just like, man, imagine where the game is going to be 15, 20 years from now, because you and I were still, I never had to trim film like some of the older dudes, but I did do the VHS. I had 7 VCRs stacked in my office, hooked together, making copies on Friday night with my first head coaching job. So I am that old.
Yeah, I remember the stack. You're gonna send me the links to all three of those, the book,
I
of
will. Yeah, I
course,
will.
and the YouTube channel, and I'll put them in the description so they can So the old guys can get to it that way. The young guys will use your little whatever that thing's called. I can't remember what it's called. Thing you
QR code.
on the QR, yeah, QR code with the phone there.
Hey, which by the way, AI can make.
AI made that.
Yeah, so if you take your link, like a link to your YouTube channel, and you put it in there and say, please create a QR code, it'll create that QR code for you, and
Good
then you
enough.
can use
Good
that
enough.
to get
Brother,
you.
I appreciate you doing this. All right, brother, I appreciate you. You did a great job, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.